Welcome back to Stoic Saga, where we explore the timeless wisdom of Stoicism to help you live a more resilient and independent life. In today's episode, we're diving into a topic that affects almost everyone at some point: emotional dependency. Whether it's feeling like you need someone's approval to be happy or relying on others for validation, emotional dependency can be a huge source of stress and frustration. But here's the good news: you don't need to rely on others to feel complete. In fact, Stoic philosophy teaches us that true freedom comes from within. By focusing on your own growth, values, and inner strength, you can break free from emotional dependency and build a life that's rooted in self-reliance and resilience. In this episode, we're going to explore 10 practical steps rooted in Stoic philosophy that will help you eliminate emotional dependency. These steps will not only help you take back control of your emotions, but they'll also empower you to live a more fulfilling, balanced life. Let me start by sharing a story that illustrates this point. There was once a young woman named Sophia who lived in a small town by the sea. Sophia was known for her kindness and her willingness to help others. But beneath her smile, she struggled with a deep sense of emotional dependency, particularly when it came to her partner, Marcos. Everything she did seemed to revolve around him. Her happiness was tied entirely to his approval. If Marcos was happy, Sophia was happy. But if he was upset, her world came crashing down. She felt like her life had no meaning without him. One day, after a heated argument with Marcos, Sophia found herself walking alone on the beach, feeling lost and uncertain. As she walked, she came across an elderly woman sitting quietly on a rock, gazing out at the horizon. Without even thinking, Sophia sat down next to her and poured out her heart. She told the woman how she felt that without Marcos, her life had no value, that she depended on him for everything, and that she was terrified of losing him. The woman listened quietly, and then, with a calm smile, said something that changed Sophia's life. "I used to feel the same way you do. I believed that without the person I loved, I would be lost, like a ship without a rudder. But then I realized something important. The ocean is still the ocean, with or without the waves. You, Sophia, are like the ocean. You do not depend on the waves to be who you are." These words struck a chord with Sophia. Over the following weeks, she began to reflect on her life and her emotional dependency. Slowly but surely, she started to distance herself from that need for Marcos's approval. She began to spend more time focusing on herself, rediscovering what made her happy without relying on external validation. She started investing in her own well-being, cultivating her passions, and taking pride in her individuality. One day, while walking along the same beach, she saw the elderly woman again and approached her with a smile. "Now I understand," she said. "The ocean is vast and deep, and while the waves may come and go, they do not define the ocean. I am like the ocean, and I have found peace in my own depth." The moral of this story is simple but powerful. While relationships and connections are important, your inner peace and happiness should not depend on others. Like the ocean, you have your own depth and strength, and by tapping into that inner power, you can break free from emotional dependency and find true freedom. The Stoics believed that we all have the capacity for emotional independence, and it begins with cultivating self-awareness, practicing self-care, and learning to let go of the need for constant validation from others. So, are you ready to take control of your emotional well-being and stop depending on others for your happiness? If so, let's dive into the 10 steps that will help you eliminate emotional dependency and start living with more confidence, balance, and inner peace. 1. Take care of your own space. Focus on yourself instead of relying on others. Now that we've set the stage, let's dive into the first step toward eliminating emotional dependency: taking care of your own space. When I say your own space, I'm talking about both your physical environment and your mental and emotional space. This is about learning to focus on yourself, your needs, and your well-being, without constantly relying on others to fill in the gaps. One of the key principles in Stoicism is the idea of self-reliance, understanding that you have the power within you to create the life you want, regardless of external circumstances or relationships. Emotional dependency often stems from a sense of incompleteness. We might feel like we're not enough on our own, so we look to others, whether it's a partner, a friend, or even a parent, to fill that void. But when you depend on others to feel whole, you give away your power. The Stoics believed that true strength comes from within, from taking responsibility for your own happiness and well-being. As Epictetus famously said, "We cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them." This means that while you can't control other people or the situations you find yourself in, you can control how you take care of yourself and your space. Let's take a practical example. Imagine you're in a relationship where you find yourself constantly looking to your partner for validation. You might ask them, "Do you think I'm doing well at work? Do you think I look good in this outfit? Do you still love me as much as you did before?" These questions, while natural, can become a sign of emotional dependency when they start to dominate your thinking. You begin to rely on your partner's answers to feel good about yourself. But here's the thing: their opinion of you doesn't define your worth, and relying on them to feel validated is not only unfair to them, but it also weakens your sense of self. What if, instead, you started focusing on your own space, on building your own confidence and taking care of your mental and emotional well-being without waiting for someone else to validate you? This is where the practice of self-care comes into play. And I don't just mean the bubble baths and spa days, though those are great too. I'm talking about deeper self-care, setting boundaries, recognizing your worth, and nurturing your own personal growth. When you take care of your own space, you stop looking for others to do it for you. A great way to start is by creating a daily routine that centers around taking care of your mind, body, and emotions. The Stoics were big on routines. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, often reflected on how he could start each day with intention and purpose. By creating a routine that focuses on what you need, whether it's setting aside time for meditation, journaling, exercising, or even just sitting quietly with your thoughts, you begin to fill your own emotional cup, so to speak. This allows you to approach relationships from a place of balance rather than neediness. Another important aspect of taking care of your own space is learning to enjoy your own company. Emotional dependency often makes us feel like we always need to be around others to feel secure or happy. But when you cultivate a sense of contentment in your own space, you realize that you're perfectly capable of enjoying life on your own terms. This doesn't mean isolating yourself or avoiding relationships. It means finding fulfillment in both solitude and connection. It's about striking that balance where you appreciate the people in your life, but you don't depend on them for your happiness. Let's return to the story of Sophia that we introduced in the beginning. After her conversation with the elderly woman on the beach, Sophia began to focus on taking care of her own space. She started spending more time on the things she enjoyed, reading, painting, and walking along the shore. She stopped waiting for Marcos to tell her how she should feel about herself, and instead she began cultivating her own sense of worth. The more she invested in herself, the less she needed external validation to feel happy. She found that by taking care of her own space, both mentally and physically, she felt more grounded, more confident, and more at peace. Now, this doesn't mean you should cut people out of your life or stop seeking support from loved ones. Relationships are important, and it's natural to lean on others from time to time. But when you take care of your own space first, you approach relationships from a place of strength rather than dependence. You stop expecting others to fill your emotional gaps because you've already filled them yourself. A practical exercise you can try is the Stoic reflection technique. At the end of each day, take a few minutes to reflect on how well you took care of your own space. Ask yourself, did I rely on someone else for validation today? Did I spend time nurturing my own well-being? By reflecting on these questions regularly, you'll start to notice patterns in your behavior and become more mindful of how you're managing your emotional space. Over time, you'll find that you're less dependent on others for emotional support because you've built a strong foundation within yourself. In Stoicism, the ultimate goal is to achieve inner peace and emotional resilience, regardless of external circumstances. Taking care of your own space is the first step toward building that inner strength. By focusing on yourself, your needs, your growth, your happiness, you create a life that is rooted in self-reliance and independence. And from that place of emotional stability, you're able to engage in relationships that are healthier, more balanced, and more fulfilling. In conclusion, emotional dependency starts to fade when you make the conscious decision to take care of your own space. Whether it's setting up a self-care routine, practicing mindfulness, or simply learning to enjoy your own company, the more you focus on nurturing yourself, the less you'll need to rely on others to feel whole. Remember, as the Stoics taught, your happiness and peace of mind are within your control. The next time you catch yourself looking to someone else for validation, pause and ask yourself, how can I take care of my own space today? 2. Let go of perfectionism. Stop stressing over being perfect. All the time. The second step in eliminating emotional dependency is learning to let go of perfectionism. Perfectionism can be one of the biggest contributors to emotional dependency because it creates a constant need for approval and validation from others. When you're always striving to be perfect, whether it's in your work, your relationships, or how you present yourself, you end up placing your sense of self-worth in the hands of others. You rely on their approval to feel like you're good enough, which fuels a cycle of emotional dependency. Stoicism teaches us that perfection is an illusion. It's not something we should strive for because it's unattainable. The Stoics believed that instead of chasing perfection, we should focus on progress and improvement, knowing that mistakes and flaws are part of the human experience. In Meditations, Marcus Aurelius writes, "Do not think that what is hard for you to master is humanly impossible, but if a thing is humanly possible, consider it to be within your reach." This is a powerful reminder that instead of stressing about being perfect, we should focus on what's within our control and accept that imperfection is part of the process. Let's consider how perfectionism plays out in real life. Imagine you're working on a project at your job, and you're constantly tweaking and revising because you want it to be flawless. You spend hours going over the smallest details, worrying about what your boss or co-workers might think if there's even a minor mistake. The stress starts to build up, and suddenly it's not just about the project. It's about your entire sense of self-worth. If the project isn't perfect, does that mean you're not good enough? This kind of thinking puts your emotional well-being in the hands of others, making you dependent on their approval to feel confident in yourself. Perfectionism also shows up in relationships. You might feel the need to be the perfect partner, friend, or family member, constantly worrying that any mistake or flaw will lead to rejection or disapproval. This kind of mindset makes you overly dependent on how others perceive you, and you start shaping your behavior around what you think they want, rather than being authentic. Over time, this creates an exhausting cycle of seeking validation and approval, which only deepens your emotional dependency. So, how do you let go of perfectionism? The first step is recognizing that perfection isn't real. No one is perfect, and expecting perfection from yourself or others is setting yourself up for disappointment. The Stoics understood that human beings are fallible, and they embraced imperfection as part of the natural order of life. Instead of striving for perfection, focus on doing your best within the limits of what's possible. Progress, not perfection, should be your goal. A practical way to start letting go of perfectionism is to shift your mindset from "I have to be perfect" to "I'm allowed to make mistakes." This doesn't mean you stop caring about doing a good job or being a good person. It means you give yourself permission to be human. Mistakes and imperfections are opportunities for growth, not reasons to feel ashamed or insecure. By embracing imperfection, you reduce the pressure to constantly seek validation from others. Here's a simple exercise you can try. The next time you catch yourself obsessing over a project, a decision, or how you appear to others, pause and ask yourself, am I aiming for progress or perfection? If it's perfection, remind yourself that no one expects you to be perfect, and you shouldn't expect that from yourself either. By focusing on progress, taking small steps forward and learning from mistakes, you allow yourself to grow without the burden of perfectionism. Another way to let go of perfectionism is by practicing self-compassion. Often, perfectionism comes from a place of fear of failure, fear of judgment, or fear of not being good enough. But when you practice self-compassion, you learn to treat yourself with kindness, even when things don't go perfectly. This reduces the emotional dependency on others' approval because you start to validate yourself. The Stoics emphasized the importance of self-reflection and self-acceptance, recognizing that being human means embracing both your strengths and your flaws. Think about the story of Sophia from the introduction. When she was emotionally dependent on Marcos, part of her struggle was the belief that she had to be perfect to keep the relationship intact. She was constantly worried that if she made a mistake or showed any weakness, Marcos would leave or think less of her. But as she started to focus on her own growth and self-care, Sophia realized that perfection wasn't the goal. What mattered was being authentic and allowing herself to grow, even if that meant making mistakes along the way. This shift in mindset helped her break free from the cycle of perfectionism and emotional dependency. Letting go of perfectionism also helps you set healthy boundaries in relationships. When you stop trying to be perfect for others, you become more comfortable saying no, setting limits, and standing up for your own needs. You no longer feel the need to please everyone or meet impossible standards, which allows you to protect your emotional well-being. This, in turn, strengthens your relationships because you're approaching them from a place of balance and authenticity, rather than from a need to be perfect. A final thought to consider is that letting go of perfectionism opens the door to vulnerability. Vulnerability can be scary because it means being honest about your flaws, mistakes, and imperfections, but it's also the key to deeper, more meaningful connections with others. When you allow yourself to be vulnerable, you create space for genuine relationships based on mutual respect and understanding, rather than on the false image of perfection. The Stoics valued honesty and integrity, and they believed that being true to yourself, imperfections and all, was the foundation of a good life. In conclusion, letting go of perfectionism is a crucial step in eliminating emotional dependency. By embracing your imperfections, practicing self-compassion, and focusing on progress rather than perfection, you take back control of your emotional well-being. You stop seeking validation from others and start finding confidence in your own growth. Remember, as the Stoics taught, perfection isn't the goal. Living with purpose and authenticity is. The next time you catch yourself striving for perfection, ask yourself, am I being true to myself, or am I trying to meet someone else's expectations? If it's the latter, it's time to let go and focus on being the best version of yourself, imperfections and all. 3. Meet new people. Expand your social circle and build emotional independence. The third step to eliminating emotional dependency is to meet new people. This might seem like an obvious solution, but its importance goes beyond simply making more friends or expanding your network. When you diversify your social connections, you prevent yourself from becoming overly reliant on just one or two people for emotional support or validation. Building a broad and varied social circle is crucial for emotional independence because it helps you balance your relationships, reduces the pressure on individual connections, and provides a healthier dynamic where you're not depending on just a few people for your sense of worth or happiness. One of the reasons emotional dependency develops is because we sometimes invest too much in one person or a small group of people. This can happen in romantic relationships, friendships, or even within families. When our world revolves around a limited number of individuals, we start to rely on them too much for emotional support, approval, and validation. This can lead to anxiety, insecurity, and a fear of losing those relationships because we've attached so much of our self-worth to them. The Stoics, however, believed in the importance of resilience and self-reliance, and part of that is learning to spread your emotional connections across a wider range of people and experiences. In Meditations, Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself of the transient nature of relationships and the importance of not becoming too attached to any one person or situation. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This Stoic principle teaches us that while relationships are important, we should not allow our happiness or emotional well-being to be entirely dependent on any single person or external circumstance. Expanding your social circle is one way to create a healthy balance, so you don't fall into the trap of emotional dependency. Let's take a real-life example. Imagine you're in a close-knit friendship with one person, and over time, you start to depend on them for emotional support, validation, and even your sense of self-worth. If that person is unavailable, busy, or dealing with their own challenges, you might start to feel anxious or lost. You might question your value or worry about the stability of the relationship. This is where emotional dependency starts to creep in. When you rely too heavily on one person, it creates an imbalance, and that can lead to insecurity and overthinking. Now, what if you had a more diverse social circle? By meeting new people and expanding your relationships, You reduce the emotional pressure on any single connection. If one friend is unavailable, you can lean on another. If you're going through a tough time, you have a wider network of people to support you. This doesn't mean spreading yourself too thin or making superficial connections. It means building a variety of relationships that enrich your life in different ways. Some friends might offer emotional support, while others might share common hobbies or interests. The key is to have a well-rounded social circle that doesn't place all your emotional needs on one person. A practical way to start meeting new people is by engaging in activities and hobbies that interest you, whether it's joining a sports team, attending a local class, volunteering, or even just participating in community events. These activities provide natural opportunities to meet people who share your interests. The Stoics believed that human beings are social creatures by nature, and we thrive when we engage with others in meaningful ways. By putting yourself in situations where you can meet new people, you're not only expanding your social circle, but also creating opportunities for growth and learning. It's also important to remember that meeting new people doesn't mean replacing old relationships. It's about complementing your existing connections with new ones, creating a healthy balance where you're not emotionally dependent on any single person. This approach aligns with the Stoic principle of moderation. The Stoics taught that we should strive for balance in all aspects of life, and that includes our relationships. By diversifying your social connections, you create a more resilient emotional foundation, which allows you to engage in relationships without becoming overly dependent. Think back to the story of Sophia from the introduction. As she began to focus on her own space and let go of perfectionism, Sophia also realized that she had been relying too heavily on her partner, Marcos, for emotional support. Her world revolved around him, and when he wasn't available, she felt lost and anxious. To break free from this cycle, Sophia decided to start meeting new people. She joined a local art class, where she met others who shared her passion for painting. She also reconnected with old friends she hadn't seen in a while. Over time, Sophia found that by expanding her social circle, she no longer felt as emotionally dependent on Marcos. She had built a support system that included multiple people, which helped her maintain her emotional independence. Meeting new people also encourages personal growth. Every new relationship introduces you to different perspectives, experiences, and challenges. By engaging with a variety of individuals, you're constantly learning and evolving, which strengthens your sense of self. Emotional dependency often stems from a fear of change or a reluctance to step outside your comfort zone. But when you meet new people and embrace new experiences, you build confidence in your ability to adapt and grow. This, in turn, reduces the need to cling to old relationships or habits out of fear or insecurity. One way to build emotional independence is by diversifying your emotional portfolio, much like how you would diversify your financial investments. Instead of putting all your emotional capital into one relationship, you spread it across a variety of connections. This creates a stronger, more stable foundation for your emotional well-being, making you less vulnerable to the ups and downs of any single relationship. The Stoics understood that while relationships are valuable, they should not define our sense of self or our emotional state. By building a wide range of meaningful connections, you protect yourself from emotional dependency and create a life that is rich and fulfilling. Finally, it's worth noting that meeting new people can be intimidating, especially if you're someone who struggles with social anxiety or shyness. But the Stoics believed in the power of pushing through discomfort to achieve personal growth. Epictetus famously said, "Difficulties are things that show a person what they are." Meeting new people might be challenging at first, but it's through these challenges that you grow stronger, more confident, and more emotionally independent. In conclusion, expanding your social circle is a key step in eliminating emotional dependency. By meeting new people, you reduce the pressure on individual relationships, create a more balanced support system, and foster personal growth. You become emotionally independent because your happiness and self-worth are no longer tied to one or two people. Instead, you build a diverse network of connections that enrich your life in different ways. Remember, as the Stoics taught, your power lies in how you choose to engage with the world. So, the next time you feel overly dependent on a relationship, take a step outside your comfort zone and start meeting new people. It's a powerful way to build emotional independence and resilience. 4. Do fun stuff. Engage in activities that make you happy and emotionally healthy. The fourth step to eliminating emotional dependency is to do fun stuff. Yes, it's as simple as that. Engaging in activities that bring you joy and fulfillment is one of the most effective ways to nurture your emotional health and break free from dependency on others. When you fill your life with activities that make you happy, you build a sense of self-sufficiency. You no longer need someone else to provide your sense of fulfillment because you're already giving it to yourself through your own experiences. Stoicism isn't just about enduring hardships and developing emotional resilience, although those are important aspects. The Stoics also believed in the value of joy, contentment, and living a good life, one that is filled with meaning and enjoyment. While they emphasized moderation and self-control, they also taught that we should seek out activities that align with our values and bring us genuine happiness. Seneca, in his letters, often wrote about the importance of enjoying life's simple pleasures. He encouraged people to find joy in everyday experiences, rather than constantly chasing external rewards or validation. One of the main reasons people become emotionally dependent on others is that they're not finding enough joy and fulfillment in their own lives. When you rely on someone else to provide your happiness, whether it's a partner, friend, or even a job, you set yourself up for emotional dependency. You might find yourself constantly seeking their company, approval, or affection to feel happy or validated. But this is a fragile foundation for emotional well-being because it places your happiness in someone else's hands. If that person is unavailable, or if the relationship faces challenges, your sense of happiness can quickly crumble. The solution: do more of what makes you happy, independently. By engaging in activities that bring you joy, you cultivate emotional independence because you're taking responsibility for your own well-being. When you do fun things that align with your values and interests, you build a strong foundation of self-reliance. You learn that your happiness isn't dependent on someone else's presence or approval. It's something you create for yourself. Let's take a real-world example. Imagine you've been in a relationship where you and your partner did everything together. You relied on each other for entertainment, socializing, and emotional support. But now, your partner is busy with work, and you find yourself feeling lonely, bored, or even resentful. This is a classic case of emotional dependency, where your happiness has become too tied to another person's availability. But what if you started exploring activities that made you happy on your own? Whether it's picking up a hobby you've always wanted to try, going for a hike, or simply reading a book that brings you joy, these independent activities help you reclaim your emotional independence. The Stoics believed that happiness comes from within, not from external circumstances or other people. In Meditations, Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking." This Stoic teaching reminds us that our mindset and actions determine our happiness, not the people around us. By engaging in activities that bring you joy, you're practicing this Stoic principle. You're taking ownership of your happiness and no longer relying on external factors. It's also important to note that doing fun stuff doesn't mean being irresponsible or avoiding life's challenges. The Stoics weren't advocating for a life of hedonism or distraction. Instead, they encouraged balance, enjoying life's pleasures while also staying grounded in your values. The key is to engage in activities that are meaningful and enriching, rather than mindlessly chasing after short-term gratification. For example, a Stoic might find joy in spending time with loved ones, practicing a craft, or simply enjoying the beauty of nature. A practical way to start doing more fun stuff is to make a list of activities that bring you joy and fulfillment. These could be hobbies, sports, creative pursuits, or even simple things like taking a walk in the park or cooking a favorite meal. Once you have your list, commit to doing at least one of these activities each week, on your own. This is important because it reinforces the idea that you don't need someone else to make these experiences meaningful. By engaging in fun activities on your own, you build emotional independence and show yourself that you are fully capable of creating happiness in your life. Think about Sophia from our earlier story. After realizing she was emotionally dependent on Marcos, she decided to start doing more of the things that made her happy. She picked up painting again, a hobby she had set aside for years, and started going to art classes by herself. She also began hiking along the coast, something she had always loved but had stopped doing because Marcos wasn't interested. These activities gave Sophia a renewed sense of joy and fulfillment. She no longer felt like she needed Marcos to be happy because she had found happiness within herself through the things she loved doing. Another benefit of doing fun stuff is that it helps you reconnect with your sense of identity. Emotional dependency often leads to losing yourself in a relationship. You start to forget who you are outside of that relationship, and your identity becomes intertwined with the other person. By engaging in activities that make you happy, you rediscover your passions, interests, and individuality. This not only strengthens your emotional independence, but also makes you a more confident and well-rounded person, which in turn can improve your relationships. One of the Stoic practices that aligns with this idea is mindful enjoyment. The Stoics believed in being fully present in whatever you're doing, whether it's a simple activity or a moment of joy. By being mindful and appreciating the present moment, you amplify the happiness and fulfillment you get from those experiences. For example, if you're reading a book, instead of worrying about what's next on your to-do list or whether someone will call you, focus entirely on the book and the pleasure it brings you. This practice not only enhances your enjoyment, but also helps you break free from the constant need for external validation or company. Let's not forget the importance of social fun either. While it's important to do things on your own, it's also valuable to engage in social activities that bring you joy. The Stoics believed that human beings are naturally social creatures, and building healthy relationships is a key part of living a good life. The difference is that you're approaching these social interactions from a place of emotional independence. You're not relying on others to make you happy, but you're sharing joy with them as part of a balanced and fulfilling life. In conclusion, doing fun stuff is more than just a way to pass the time. It's a vital part of building emotional independence. By engaging in activities that bring you joy, you reclaim your sense of self and stop relying on others for your happiness. You learn that you are fully capable of creating joy and fulfillment in your own life, which strengthens your emotional well-being and makes you less dependent on external sources of validation. So the next time you feel emotionally dependent on someone else, take a step back and ask yourself, what can I do today that brings me joy, just for me? 5. Spend time alone. Get comfortable, being by yourself, and enjoy your own company. The fifth step in eliminating emotional dependency is learning to spend time alone and enjoy your own company. This might sound simple, but for many people, the idea of being alone can be intimidating or even uncomfortable. Emotional dependency often develops when we rely on others to fill our time, distract us from our thoughts, or provide a sense of validation. But when you learn to spend time alone and appreciate solitude, you build emotional independence, self-reliance, and a deeper understanding of yourself. The Stoics valued solitude as a time for reflection, personal growth, and inner peace. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, often wrote about the importance of retreating into oneself, away from the noise and distractions of the outside world. He wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." This idea speaks to the heart of why spending time alone is so crucial. When you cultivate the ability to be at peace with yourself, you no longer depend on external factors or other people to feel content. You realize that your sense of happiness and fulfillment can come from within. For many people, being alone can feel uncomfortable because it forces them to confront their thoughts, insecurities, or worries without the distraction of others. It's easy to use social interactions, relationships, or even technology as a way to avoid being alone with your thoughts. But avoiding solitude only deepens emotional dependency because you never learn how to be self-sufficient. When you spend time alone, you give yourself the opportunity to reflect, recharge, and reconnect with your inner self. Let's take a real-world example. Imagine you're someone who is always surrounded by people, whether it's through work, family, or friendships. You rarely spend time alone because you enjoy the company of others and feel uncomfortable with the idea of solitude. But this constant need for interaction can lead to emotional dependency, where you feel anxious or incomplete when you're not with others. You might even start to fear being alone because it makes you feel disconnected or unimportant. Now, let's flip the scenario. What if you started to spend intentional time alone, not as a way to isolate yourself, but as a way to cultivate self-awareness and emotional independence? Imagine taking a walk by yourself, sitting quietly in a park, or even spending an evening at home without the distraction of your phone or social media. At first, it might feel strange or even unsettling, but over time, you begin to realize that solitude isn't something to fear. It's a gift. It's a time to reflect, to think deeply, and to reconnect with who you are outside of your relationships or social roles. This practice of spending time alone aligns perfectly with Stoic philosophy. The Stoics believed that we should not be dependent on external circumstances or people for our happiness. Instead, we should find contentment within ourselves. By spending time alone, you practice this Stoic principle of self-reliance. You learn that your peace of mind doesn't come from being with others. It comes from cultivating a calm and balanced inner world. A great way to start enjoying your own company is by planning solo activities that you genuinely enjoy. This could be anything from going to a movie by yourself, reading a book, or taking yourself out for a meal. The key is to choose activities that allow you to be fully present with yourself, without the need for distraction or external validation. The more you engage in these solo activities, the more comfortable you'll become with solitude, and the less you'll feel the need to constantly be surrounded by others. Another important aspect of spending time alone is that it gives you the opportunity for self-reflection. When you're constantly in the company of others, it can be difficult to find the time and space to reflect on your own thoughts, emotions, and goals. But solitude provides a quiet environment where you can think more deeply about your life, your values, and the direction you're heading. The Stoics valued this kind of introspection because it allowed them to align their actions with their principles. By spending time alone, you give yourself the chance to check in with yourself and make sure that you're living in accordance with your own values, not someone else's. Let's go back to Sophia's story. As she began to focus on taking care of her own space and meeting new people, she also realized that she had been avoiding time alone because it made her feel anxious. She had always relied on Marcos or her friends to fill her time and provide a sense of purpose. But after her conversation with the elderly woman on the beach, Sophia decided to embrace solitude as part of her journey toward emotional independence. She started spending more time by herself, taking long walks along the coast, journaling, and even meditating. At first, it was uncomfortable. She felt the urge to reach for her phone or call someone to fill the silence. But over time, Sophia began to appreciate the peace and clarity that came with solitude. She found that by spending time alone, she became more confident, more self-aware, and less reliant on others for emotional support. Solitude also helps you develop a stronger sense of self-worth. When you're comfortable being alone, you're not constantly seeking validation or approval from others. You stop worrying about what people think of you because you've cultivated a sense of inner confidence that doesn't depend on external opinions. This is a powerful way to break free from emotional dependency, because you no longer need someone else to make you feel valued or important. You've already given that to yourself. It's also worth noting that spending time alone doesn't mean you have to isolate yourself or avoid relationships. In fact, the opposite is true. When you're comfortable being alone, you're able to engage in relationships from a place of strength and independence, rather than from a place of neediness or dependence. You're not afraid of being alone because you know that your happiness and self-worth don't depend on others. This makes your relationships healthier and more balanced because you're not relying on them to fill emotional gaps. A practical exercise you can try is the Stoic practice of journaling. At the end of each day, spend a few minutes alone with your thoughts and write down what's on your mind. Reflect on your experiences, your emotions, and your goals. This simple act of journaling helps you connect with yourself and gives you a space to process your thoughts without external influence. Over time, you'll find that journaling becomes a powerful tool for self-reflection and emotional growth. In conclusion, spending time alone is a key step in eliminating emotional dependency. By learning to enjoy your own company and embracing solitude, you build emotional independence and self-reliance. You stop relying on others to fill your time or validate your worth, and instead you find peace and fulfillment within yourself. As the Stoics taught, true happiness comes from within, and solitude is a powerful way to tap into that inner source of strength. So, the next time you feel uncomfortable with the idea of being alone, remember that solitude is an opportunity for growth, reflection, and emotional freedom. 6. Learn to say no. Protect your time and energy by saying no when you need to. The sixth step in eliminating emotional dependency is learning to say no. This might sound simple, but for many people, saying no can be incredibly difficult, especially when we've developed emotional dependencies on others. Whether it's agreeing to something because you don't want to disappoint someone or going along with plans that don't serve your needs, emotional dependency often manifests in an inability to set boundaries. Learning to say no is about protecting your time, energy, and emotional well-being, and it's a critical step toward building emotional independence. Stoicism teaches us to focus on what is within our control and to protect our inner peace. Part of this involves setting boundaries and not overextending ourselves for the sake of others, especially if it comes at the expense of our own well-being. Epictetus famously said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." This Stoic principle reminds us that true freedom comes from being able to control our own actions and decisions, not from being at the mercy of others' expectations or demands. One of the reasons emotional dependency develops is because we feel a need to please others in order to gain their approval or affection. We might say yes to things we don't really want to do, or agree to requests that drain our energy, because we fear that saying no will result in rejection or disappointment. But constantly saying yes, out of fear or guilt, only deepens the cycle of dependency. It puts others' needs before your own, and reinforces the belief that your worth is tied to how much you can do for others. Learning to say no is about reclaiming your power and establishing healthy boundaries. It's about recognizing that your time and energy are valuable, and you have the right to protect them. By saying no when you need to, you're not being selfish, you're practicing self-care. The Stoics believed that we should live with integrity, and that part of integrity is being honest about what we can and cannot give. Let's take a real-life example. Imagine you're someone who is always there for your friends and family. Whenever someone asks you for help, you drop everything to be there for them, even if it means sacrificing your own time or well-being. You've developed a reputation as the go-to person, but over time you start to feel drained, resentful, or even taken for granted. The more you say yes, the more people come to rely on you, and the harder it becomes to say no. This is a classic case of emotional dependency, where you feel obligated to meet others' needs at the expense of your own. Now, imagine what would happen if you started to set boundaries and say no when necessary. At first, it might feel uncomfortable, especially if you're used to being the person who always says yes. But over time, you'll notice that by protecting your time and energy, you're able to take better care of yourself. You're no longer overcommitting or stretching yourself too thin, and while some people might be disappointed at first, they'll ultimately respect your boundaries and understand that you have the right to prioritize your own well-being. The Stoics believed that boundaries are essential for living a balanced and peaceful life. By learning to say no, you create space in your life for the things that truly matter to you. You stop filling your time with obligations that don't align with your values, and you start focusing on what brings you joy and fulfillment. Saying no also helps you avoid resentment. When you say yes to things you don't really want to do, it often leads to feelings of frustration or anger, either toward yourself for overcommitting or toward others for asking too much of you. But by saying no, you prevent these negative emotions from building up. One practical way to start saying no is by practicing assertive communication. When someone asks you to do something that you don't have the time, energy, or desire to do, be honest and clear in your response. You don't need to over-explain or justify your decision. Simply saying, "I can't commit to that right now," or "I don't have the capacity to take that on," is enough. The key is to communicate your boundaries with confidence and kindness without feeling guilty or defensive. Another important aspect of learning to say no is understanding that you're not responsible for other people's reactions. One of the reasons we struggle to say no is because we fear how the other person will react, whether they'll be disappointed, upset, or think less of us. But Stoicism teaches us to focus on what is within our control, and other people's reactions are not something we can control. What we can control is how we communicate our boundaries and how we manage our own time and energy. Let's revisit Sophia's journey. After realizing that she had been emotionally dependent on Marcos, Sophia also started to notice that she was saying yes to things she didn't really want to do, both in her relationship and with her friends. She would agree to plans or favors because she didn't want to upset anyone, even if it meant sacrificing her own needs. But as she began to work on her emotional independence, Sophia made a conscious effort to start saying no when she needed to. At first, it was difficult. She worried that people would be disappointed or that she would come across as selfish. But the more she practiced setting boundaries, the more confident she became. She found that by saying no when necessary, she had more energy and time to focus on the things that truly mattered to her. Saying no also empowers you to take charge of your own life. When you stop agreeing to things out of obligation or fear, you become more intentional about how you spend your time. You start to make decisions based on what's best for you rather than what others expect from you. This is a powerful way to break free from emotional dependency because you're no longer relying on others to define your worth or validate your choices. You're taking control of your own path. A practical exercise you can try is the no list. At the beginning of each week, write down a list of things you're going to say no to, whether it's social invitations, extra work assignments, or unnecessary favors. This list will serve as a reminder of your commitment to protecting your time and energy. Each time you successfully say no to something that doesn't serve you, you'll feel a sense of empowerment and emotional freedom. In conclusion, learning to say no is a crucial step in eliminating emotional dependency. By setting boundaries and protecting your time and energy, you take back control of your life and prioritize your own well-being. You stop saying yes out of fear or obligation, and you start living with intention and integrity. Remember, as the Stoics taught, you are responsible for your own actions, not for how others react to them. The next time you feel pressured to say yes to something that doesn't align with your needs, pause and ask yourself, am I saying yes because I want to, or because I feel like I have to? If it's the latter, it's time to practice the power of no. 7. Invest in yourself. Don't feel guilty about spending time or money on self-care. The 7th step to eliminating emotional dependency is to invest in yourself. This might sound straightforward, but it's something many people struggle with, especially when they've spent years putting others first or seeking external validation. Investing in yourself means taking the time, energy, and sometimes money to nurture your own growth, happiness, and well-being. It's about prioritizing self-care and personal development without feeling guilty about it. When you invest in yourself, you build a strong foundation of emotional independence because you're showing yourself that your own needs, dreams, and happiness matter. Stoic philosophy places a strong emphasis on self-mastery and personal growth. The Stoics believed that we should continuously strive to improve ourselves, both mentally and physically. But this kind of self-improvement doesn't happen by accident. It requires deliberate effort, and often the willingness to invest in yourself. Whether it's taking the time to develop new skills, investing in your health, or simply allowing yourself moments of rest and relaxation, investing in yourself is an essential part of living a balanced and fulfilling life. One of the reasons emotional dependency develops is because we neglect our own needs in favor of focusing on others. We might prioritize someone else's happiness, career, or goals, leaving little room for our own personal growth. Over time, this can lead to feelings of resentment, burnout, and a deep sense of unfulfillment. But when you invest in yourself, you're taking back control of your life. You're acknowledging that your needs and well-being are just as important as anyone else's, and you're making a conscious effort to prioritize them. A common misconception about self-care is that it's selfish or indulgent, especially if it involves spending money on things that aren't considered essential. But the truth is, self-care is essential. It's about maintaining your physical, emotional, and mental health so that you can show up as your best self in all areas of life. The Stoics would argue that investing in yourself isn't just a personal benefit, it's also a way to better serve others. As Seneca once said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." By taking care of yourself and investing in your personal growth, you're making the most of the time and opportunities you have. Let's take a practical example. Imagine you've been focusing so much on your work, family, or relationships that you've stopped investing in your own well-being. Maybe you've put off going to the gym, neglected your hobbies, or avoided taking time off to relax. Over time, you start to feel drained, stressed, and emotionally dependent on others to lift your spirits. This is a clear sign that you're not investing enough in yourself. Now, imagine what would happen if you started making self-care a priority. What if you carved out time each week to do something you enjoy, whether it's taking a yoga class, reading a book, or pursuing a creative project? What if you allowed yourself to spend money on things that bring you joy and help you grow without feeling guilty about it? By investing in yourself, you're sending a powerful message. I am worth the time, energy, and resources I put into my own well-being. This shift in mindset is key to breaking free from emotional dependency because it puts the focus back on your own growth and happiness, rather than relying on others to fill that role. One of the best ways to start investing in yourself is by creating a self-care routine that works for you. This doesn't have to be complicated or time-consuming. It's about finding small, meaningful ways to take care of yourself on a regular basis. Maybe that means setting aside 15 minutes each morning for meditation or journaling. Maybe it means signing up for a class that helps you develop a new skill or reconnect with a passion. The key is to make it a priority and not feel guilty about taking time for yourself. Think back to Sophia's story. As she worked on eliminating her emotional dependency on Marcos, she realized that she had spent so much time focusing on his needs and happiness that she had neglected her own. She felt guilty about spending money on herself or taking time away from their relationship to pursue her own interests. But as Sophia began to invest in herself, whether it was through painting, hiking, or simply spending time alone, she discovered that she felt more confident, more fulfilled, and more emotionally independent. She no longer needed Marcos's approval or validation to feel good about herself because she had learned to provide that for herself. Investing in yourself also means setting goals for your personal growth. The Stoics were big on the idea of progress, of constantly working to improve yourself, both morally and intellectually. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, often reflected on his own progress and the areas of his life where he needed to grow. By setting personal goals, whether it's learning a new skill, improving your health, or working on your emotional well-being, you're taking an active role in your own development. These goals give you a sense of purpose and direction, which helps reduce emotional dependency because you're not waiting for someone else to give your life meaning. You're creating that meaning for yourself. Another important aspect of investing in yourself is taking care of your mental health. Emotional dependency often stems from unresolved insecurities, anxieties, or past experiences that have left you feeling unworthy or incomplete. By investing in your mental health, whether it's through therapy, mindfulness practices, or simply taking time to rest, you're giving yourself the tools to heal and grow. The Stoics believed in the importance of inner peace, and part of achieving that peace is taking care of your mental and emotional well-being. A practical exercise you can try is the self-investment plan. At the beginning of each month, write down 3 areas of your life where you want to invest in yourself. These could be related to your health, personal development, or emotional well-being. Then, make a plan for how you're going to invest in those areas. This could be as simple as scheduling time for exercise, signing up for a class, or booking a therapy session. The key is to commit to these investments and to recognize that you are worth the time, energy, and money you put into your own growth. In conclusion, investing in yourself is one of the most important steps in eliminating emotional dependency. By prioritizing your own well-being, personal growth, and happiness, you build emotional independence and self-confidence. You stop relying on others to provide your sense of worth or fulfillment because you're taking responsibility for your own happiness. Remember, as the Stoics taught, the most important investment you can make is in yourself. So, the next time you feel guilty about spending time or money on self-care, remind yourself that you're not just taking care of yourself. You're building the foundation for a happier, more fulfilled life. 8. Set solid boundaries. Make sure your relationships have clear and firm limits. The 8th step in eliminating emotional dependency is learning to set solid boundaries. Boundaries are essential in any healthy relationship, whether it's with a partner, family member, friend, or even a co-worker. They help define what's acceptable and what isn't, protecting your emotional well-being and ensuring that your needs are respected. When you don't have clear boundaries, you risk losing yourself in relationships, which can lead to emotional dependency. By setting firm limits, you create space for mutual respect, emotional independence, and healthier connections. Stoic philosophy places great emphasis on self-discipline and maintaining control over your emotions. One of the ways to practice this control is by setting boundaries that protect your mental and emotional health. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic philosophers, taught that you are responsible for how you act, no matter how you feel. This idea is central to boundary setting. You are in charge of defining and enforcing the limits that safeguard your emotional space, regardless of how others may react or how difficult it may feel in the moment. Why are boundaries so important in breaking free from emotional dependency? When you don't have clear boundaries, you might find yourself saying yes to things you don't want to do, taking on other people's emotions, or feeling responsible for their happiness. This lack of boundaries creates a dynamic where you're constantly giving without receiving, and it can lead to resentment, burnout, and emotional exhaustion. Over time, you become emotionally dependent on others because you've blurred the lines between where you end and where they begin. Boundaries allow you to reclaim your emotional space and ensure that your needs are being met in relationships. Let's take a real-world example. Imagine you're in a relationship where you've developed a pattern of always putting the other person's needs ahead of your own. You're constantly available for them, whether it's to listen to their problems, help them with tasks, or spend time together, even when it's inconvenient for you. Over time, this dynamic becomes exhausting, and you start to feel emotionally drained because your boundaries aren't being respected, or maybe you haven't even set them in the first place. You might even fear that if you assert your boundaries, the other person will feel hurt or pull away, which makes you even more emotionally dependent on their approval. Now, imagine what would happen if you started to set clear boundaries in that relationship. You could communicate your needs honestly, whether it's needing time alone, asking for help in return, or saying no when you don't have the capacity to give. At first, it might feel uncomfortable or even guilt-inducing, but over time you'll find that boundaries create healthier relationships. You'll feel more respected, less overwhelmed, and more emotionally independent, because you've created a structure that honors your needs as much as the other person's. The Stoics believed that setting boundaries is a form of self-respect. It's about acknowledging your own worth and understanding that your time, energy, and emotional space are valuable. When you set boundaries, you're practicing the Stoic principle of focusing on what you can control: your actions, your reactions, and your choices. You can't control how others will react to your boundaries, but you can control how you enforce them. This is where true emotional independence comes from, knowing that you have the right to protect your well-being, regardless of external circumstances. A practical way to start setting boundaries is by identifying the areas in your life where you feel overwhelmed, drained, or taken for granted. These are often signs that your boundaries are too loose or non-existent. Once you've identified these areas, think about what kind of boundaries you need to set to protect your emotional health. This could be anything from limiting the amount of time you spend with certain people to setting limits on how much emotional support you're able to give. The key is to be clear and direct when communicating these boundaries. You don't need to apologize or feel guilty for setting limits. It's about respecting your own needs and ensuring that your relationships are balanced. Let's return to Sophia's story. As she worked on building her emotional independence, Sophia realized that she had never set clear boundaries with Marcos. She had always been available for him, putting his needs ahead of her own and rarely speaking up when she felt overwhelmed. But as she began to focus on herself and invest in her own well-being, Sophia recognized the importance of setting boundaries. She started by having an open conversation with Marcos about her needs. She explained that while she cared deeply for him, she needed time for herself to recharge and pursue her own interests. At first, it was difficult for both of them to adjust to these new boundaries, but over time, their relationship improved. Sophia felt more confident and secure, knowing that her emotional space was being respected, and their relationship became healthier and more balanced as a result. Setting boundaries doesn't just improve romantic relationships. It's also crucial in friendships, family dynamics, and even professional environments. For example, in a work setting, you might need to set boundaries around your availability to prevent burnout. Maybe you've been saying yes to every request or staying late every day because you don't want to disappoint your boss or co-workers. But this kind of behavior can quickly lead to emotional exhaustion. By setting boundaries, such as limiting your working hours or being clear about what tasks you can reasonably take on, you protect your emotional well-being and avoid becoming overly dependent on external validation. Another benefit of setting boundaries is that it helps you avoid emotional enmeshment. Emotional enmeshment occurs when the boundaries between two people become blurred and they begin to take on each other's emotions, problems, and responsibilities. This often happens in close relationships where one person feels responsible for the other's happiness or emotional state. But emotional enmeshment can be incredibly draining and lead to a loss of individual identity. By setting clear boundaries, you prevent this kind of unhealthy dynamic and ensure that both you and the other person maintain your emotional independence. A practical exercise you can try is the boundary audit. Take some time to reflect on the relationships in your life and identify where your boundaries might need strengthening. Are there areas where you're overcommitting, feeling drained, or not being honest about your needs? Once you've identified these areas, write down the boundaries you need to set and how you're going to communicate them. This exercise helps you gain clarity on where your emotional space needs protection and empowers you to take action. In conclusion, setting solid boundaries is a vital step in eliminating emotional dependency. Boundaries protect your emotional well-being, ensure that your needs are respected, and create healthier, more balanced relationships. By being clear about what you will and won't accept, you reclaim your emotional independence and stop relying on others to define your worth. Remember, as the Stoics taught, you are responsible for your own peace of mind, and setting boundaries is a powerful way to protect that peace. The next time you feel overwhelmed or taken for granted, ask yourself, what boundary do I need to set to protect my emotional well-being? 9. Don't settle for less than you give. Make sure what you give and get in relationships is balanced. The 9th step in eliminating emotional dependency is to stop settling for less than you give. Relationships, whether they're romantic, platonic, or familial, should be built on mutual respect, support, and reciprocity. Emotional dependency often develops when there is an imbalance in what you're giving and what you're receiving. If you consistently find yourself giving more, whether it's emotional support, time, or energy, without getting the same in return, you create a dynamic that can lead to dependency and resentment. Learning to recognize and demand balance in your relationships is a key part of maintaining your emotional independence. Stoicism teaches us the importance of equity and fairness in all aspects of life, including our relationships. The Stoics believed that we should interact with others in a way that reflects virtue, integrity, and justice. This means that in relationships we should strive for balance, giving as much as we receive, and ensuring that we're not taken advantage of or undervalued. Marcus Aurelius, in Meditations, wrote about the importance of acting justly and not allowing others to take more than what is fair. This principle can be directly applied to relationships. If you're constantly giving more than you're receiving, it's a sign that the relationship is out of balance, and that imbalance can lead to emotional dependency. Why does this imbalance lead to emotional dependency? When you give more than you receive, you start to feel undervalued, unappreciated, and emotionally drained. Over time, this creates a sense of insecurity in the relationship. You begin to wonder if the other person cares about you as much as you care about them, or if they would be there for you in the same way you've been there for them. This insecurity fuels emotional dependency because you become more invested in seeking their approval or validation to compensate for the imbalance. You might even fear setting boundaries or asking for more, because you worry that the other person will pull away if you stop giving so much. The Stoics believed that self-respect and self-worth are crucial to maintaining healthy relationships. When you value yourself, you naturally expect others to value you as well. This means not settling for relationships where you're constantly giving without receiving the same level of care and support. The Stoics taught that we should focus on relationships that bring mutual benefit, rather than ones that drain our energy and undermine our self-worth. If a relationship is one-sided, it's not a relationship based on virtue or fairness. Let's look at a real-world example. Imagine you're in a friendship where you're always the one initiating plans, providing emotional support, and making time for the other person. You listen to their problems, offer advice, and are there whenever they need you. But when you need support, they're often too busy, unavailable, or simply uninterested in helping you. Over time, you start to feel like the relationship is one-sided. You're giving far more than you're receiving. This creates a sense of emotional dependency because you begin to seek their approval or attention to feel valued. You might even make excuses for their lack of effort, convincing yourself that it's normal or that you're expecting too much. Now imagine what would happen if you recognized this imbalance and decided to stop settling for less than you give. Instead of accepting the one-sided dynamic, you set clear boundaries and communicate your needs. You might tell your friend, "I've noticed that I'm always the one reaching out or offering support, and I'd appreciate it if our friendship was more balanced." At first, this might feel uncomfortable, but by addressing the imbalance, you're reclaiming your emotional independence. You're no longer relying on their approval or attention to feel valued. You're demanding the same level of respect and effort that you give. The Stoics believed that relationships should be based on mutual respect, and part of that respect involves reciprocity. Reciprocity means that both people in the relationship are contributing equally, emotionally, mentally, and physically. This doesn't mean that every interaction or act of kindness needs to be perfectly balanced, but over time, the relationship should feel fair and supportive on both sides. If you find yourself constantly giving without receiving, it's a sign that the relationship isn't aligned with Stoic principles of justice and fairness. Think back to Sophia's journey. After working on her emotional independence and setting boundaries, Sophia also realized that her relationship with Marcos was often unbalanced. She was always the one giving more, whether it was emotional support, time, or effort. Marcos, on the other hand, didn't always reciprocate in the same way. Instead of settling for this imbalance, Sophia had a conversation with Marcos about her needs and expectations. She explained that while she loved supporting him, she also needed the same level of care and effort in return. By addressing the imbalance, Sophia took a step toward creating a more equal and healthy relationship, one where both partners gave and received equally. Learning to stop settling for less than you give also involves self-reflection. Take some time to think about your relationships. Are they balanced? Are you receiving the same level of care and support that you're giving? If not, ask yourself why you're settling for less. Sometimes we settle for less because we fear confrontation, or we don't believe we deserve better. But Stoic philosophy teaches us to value ourselves and to act with integrity in all aspects of life, including our relationships. By recognizing your worth and demanding reciprocity, you strengthen your emotional independence and create relationships that are built on mutual respect. A practical exercise you can try is the relationship balance check. Take a piece of paper and write down the key relationships in your life. whether they're romantic, platonic, or familial. Next to each relationship, write down what you give to that person and what you receive in return. Is the relationship balanced, or is there an obvious disparity in effort, support, or care? If you notice that one or more relationships are unbalanced, think about what steps you can take to address the situation. This might involve having a conversation, setting boundaries, or even reassessing whether the relationship is serving your emotional well-being. In conclusion, not settling for less than you give is an essential step in eliminating emotional dependency. By ensuring that your relationships are balanced and based on mutual respect and reciprocity, you protect your emotional well-being and avoid the trap of overgiving. You deserve relationships where you are valued, respected, and supported in the same way you give to others. Remember, as the Stoics taught, you are responsible for maintaining your own sense of self-worth, and that includes not settling for less than you deserve. The next time you feel like you're giving more than you're receiving, ask yourself, is this relationship balanced? And if not, what can I do to create more reciprocity? 10. Speak up confidently. Be honest and clear. When communicating to avoid emotional dependency. The 10th and final step in eliminating emotional dependency is learning to speak up confidently. Honest, clear communication is one of the most powerful tools you have to maintain emotional independence and healthy relationships. When you express your needs, desires, and boundaries clearly, you not only avoid misunderstandings, but also assert your right to be treated with respect. Emotional dependency often stems from a fear of speaking up, whether it's out of worry about being judged, rejected, or misunderstood. But by learning to communicate confidently, you take control of your emotional well-being and create relationships based on mutual understanding and respect. The Stoics believed deeply in the value of honest and direct communication. They taught that we should speak truthfully and act with integrity in all of our interactions. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic philosophers, emphasized that we should not fear the judgment of others when we speak the truth. He said, "If anyone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said of you, but answer, 'He was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned these alone.'" This Stoic attitude encourages us to be honest and unafraid of how others might perceive our truth. Clear, direct communication is the foundation of healthy relationships and is essential for emotional independence. Why is speaking up so important in eliminating emotional dependency? When you don't speak up, you might end up suppressing your feelings, hiding your true needs, or going along with things you don't really want. Over time, this creates resentment, frustration, and a sense of powerlessness. You might begin to feel as if your voice doesn't matter, or worse, that your needs aren't valid. This can lead to emotional dependency because you start relying on others to guess or anticipate your needs, rather than taking responsibility for communicating them yourself. Speaking up confidently allows you to assert your needs without fear and ensures that your emotional well-being is prioritized. Let's take a practical example. Imagine you're in a romantic relationship where you often feel like your needs aren't being met. Perhaps you want more quality time with your partner, or maybe you feel like certain issues in the relationship need to be addressed. Instead of speaking up, though, you stay silent because you don't want to cause conflict, or you fear that your partner might react negatively. Over time, this silence leads to emotional dependency. You're waiting for your partner to notice your needs or to fix the situation without you having to speak up. But the reality is, Your partner can't read your mind, and by not expressing your needs, you're only deepening the emotional imbalance in the relationship. Now, imagine what would happen if you confidently communicated your needs to your partner. You might say, "I've noticed that we haven't spent much quality time together lately, and I'd like to make an effort to change that." Or, "There's something that's been bothering me, and I think it's important we talk about it." By speaking up, you're asserting your emotional needs in a clear and respectful way. You're no longer relying on your partner to guess what you want or need. You're taking responsibility for your own emotional well-being by communicating it directly. The Stoics would argue that communication is an act of self-respect. When you speak up for yourself, you're honoring your own needs and ensuring that you're treated with the respect you deserve. Clear communication also prevents the misunderstandings and miscommunications that can lead to emotional dependency. Often, emotional dependency arises because we feel misunderstood or undervalued in relationships, but instead of addressing the issue directly, we internalize it. By speaking up, you avoid this trap and create a dynamic where your voice is heard, respected, and valued. Think back to Sophia's journey. One of the reasons Sophia became emotionally dependent on Marcos was because she didn't speak up about her own needs and boundaries. She was afraid that if she voiced her concerns or desires, Marcos might pull away or react negatively. But as she worked on her emotional independence, Sophia realized that part of maintaining healthy relationships is being able to communicate confidently and clearly. She began to speak up when something was bothering her or when she needed more support from Marcos. At first it felt uncomfortable, but over time Sophia discovered that by communicating honestly, her relationship became more balanced and her emotional dependency decreased. Learning to speak up confidently also means letting go of the fear of rejection. One of the main reasons people avoid speaking up is because they fear how the other person will react. Will they get upset? Will they reject you? Will the relationship change? These fears are normal, but they often prevent you from having the honest conversations that are necessary for healthy relationships. The Stoics believed that we should not fear rejection or the opinions of others, because those things are outside of our control. What we can control is how we communicate and whether we choose to speak with integrity and honesty. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them knows anything about the subject." A practical way to start speaking up confidently is by practicing assertiveness. Assertiveness is the ability to express your thoughts, feelings, and needs clearly and respectfully, without being passive or aggressive. When you're assertive, you communicate in a way that respects both your own rights and the rights of the other person. For example, instead of saying, "You never spend time with me," which might come across as accusatory, you could say, "I've been feeling like we haven't spent as much time together lately, and I'd love for us to plan something soon." This kind of communication is clear, direct, and respectful. It expresses your needs without blaming or attacking the other person. Another important aspect of speaking up confidently is learning to accept the outcome, whatever it may be. The Stoics taught that while we should always strive to act with integrity, we cannot control how others will respond. When you speak up, there's always a possibility that the other person might react negatively, misunderstand your intentions, or even reject your request. But this is where emotional independence comes in. By accepting that you can't control their reaction, you free yourself from the fear of speaking up. What matters is that you've communicated your truth clearly and respectfully. The outcome is secondary to the act of honoring your own voice. A practical exercise you can try is the Speak Up Challenge. Identify one situation in your life where you've been hesitant to speak up, whether it's a conversation with a friend, family member, or partner. Write down what you want to say and how you plan to communicate it assertively. Then, commit to having that conversation within the next week. This exercise helps you build confidence in your communication skills and reinforces the idea that speaking up is an essential part of maintaining emotional independence. In conclusion, speaking up confidently is the final step in eliminating emotional dependency. By learning to communicate your needs, desires, and boundaries clearly, you take control of your emotional well-being and create healthier, more balanced relationships. You no longer rely on others to guess what you need or feel. You express it directly, which fosters mutual respect and understanding. Remember, as the Stoics taught, speaking the truth is an act of self-respect and integrity. So, the next time you feel hesitant to speak up, ask yourself, am I honoring my own needs by staying silent, or is it time to confidently express my truth? We've covered 10 powerful steps to eliminate emotional dependency, each rooted in Stoic principles. From taking care of your own space to setting boundaries and communicating clearly, these steps are about building emotional independence and fostering healthier relationships. Remember, true happiness and fulfillment come from within, not from relying on others. Whether you focus on spending time alone, saying no, or investing in yourself, each step will help you create more balance and resilience in your life. Pick one step to start applying today and take that first move toward emotional freedom. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who could benefit from these insights. Let's keep building a community focused on personal growth and living the Stoic way. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.